Hello and welcome to, let's see, 2, 4, 5, part 6, good lord, or 7, of the aircraft carriers of the 1920s and 30s Long Patrol. And it is aircraft carriers of the Big Three in the 1930s. Now, I'm going to do something a little bit different. And that is, I'm going to start off with something which I originally had planned to put at the end of the previous video. And the reason I'm starting off with this is because I know how many people watch the end of my videos, right to the end, and I know how many people watch the beginnings of them. So, I'm going to go to the beginning. Helping put the videos together for the previous video, which I should probably put this at the beginning of that one, but I wasn't thinking about it when I recorded that, and I like the way I've recorded it, so I don't want to go back and play with that. I have to thank John Jordan and George Neage for doing it originally, for all their works. You know, John Jordan's books, as you know, regularly feature in my brew ships and my book reviews because they are very good books. They're very well researched. They've got lots of very interesting material in here. And honestly, in many ways, the Byrne article in here is what started off the whole thing of putting Joffre and Graf Zeppelin in this Desert Holders live, Long Patrol. And to Dragon Fennell, Manuel Pedro Gonzalez Lopez, and Olivia, for passing on pictures of the Joffre, which I hadn't been able to get anywhere else. So thank you to them. And Manuel, thank you especially for passing me on the entire book in article in PDF form. I'm not sure if you're supposed to or not, but thank you very kindly for helping with the research material and sharing the research material with me, because it really made it worthwhile and work. Anyway, without much further ado, it's into P6, Carriers in the 1930s. The cool names: Glorious, Unusual, Prancing Dragon. I know, there are various ways you can actually translate Ryujo's name, and I realize Prancing Dragon is aesthetically pleasing to an English translation, but is not necessarily 100% correct. But it's Prancing Dragon. I like it. I'm keeping it. In the end, I'm the one recording the video. And for these, I can still turn back to this lovely, lovely table, which shows you how many of the aircraft carriers that we do think about at the beginning of World War II, when they actually were built. Glorious, 1930 data completion, 786 feet long, 90 feet beam, displacement again 22,500 tons, same as the Courageous, speed 30.5 knots, 90,000 shaft horsepower, and 16 4.7-inch guns with an AA. 50 aircraft. As completed, she still had the lower flying off position. Later in her life, she would of course lose that. What annoys me about Glorious and Courageous on regular occasions is they were lost so sillily. And really, the Royal Navy has nowhere to hide on this subject. Yes, they had developed anti-submarine warfare using aircraft carriers as the nexus of hunter fleets to attack and track down submarines and kill them, but That's what you have the cruiser carriers for. Argus. Hermes. 10,000 and 14,000 tons, respectively. 15 aircraft. Each. No, nothing is an expendable asset, but let's be honest, losing one of those is going to be less of a problem than losing something which can take 50 aircraft. Ryujo, of course, was the attempt to build a carrier under 10,000 tons. And launched 1933, 549 feet long, 61 feet wide, 25 knots top speed, 40,000 shaft horsepower, and 12 5.1-inch AA guns. No list on how many aircraft carried, but I know I wouldn't want to be in it. Look at that low freeboard, and look at how top-heavy you can see it looks. They've done a lot of effort to try and keep the weight down, and that's not made for a stable ship, but it operated quite well. To quote Sir Arthur John, "There are many other arrangements, devices, and fittings which are novel and peculiar to carriers, and which have been found necessary or desirable on service, and have been developed, tested, and improved with experience. In this work, in which several different interests are concerned, a subcommittee appointed on August 22nd, 1918, and reconstituted on November 11th, 1921, has rendered the most useful service. This body is known as the Joint Technical Committee on Aviation Arrangements in Her Majesty's Ships." That is what you have to develop aircraft carriers. You need to develop both the aircraft and the ships, because there is no point having aircraft which your ships cannot take, and there is no point having ships which cannot take your aircraft. It's symbiotic. It's also another reason why you really need ships with big hangars, big flight decks, and big lifts, because then you can always take the maximum number of aircraft in terms of types. So, you have USS Ranger and Soryu. Now, they're fun ships. They really are. Ranger has the interesting honor of being the first purpose-built American aircraft carrier, and the only ship of its class. Basically, the idea was that they could try and build something very small, very light. And build a lot of them. Now, this doesn't mean she actually doesn't render useful service in World War II. She provides air support in Operation Torch. She fights in Operation Leader and air attacks on German shipping off Norway. And she does spend most of her World War II in the Atlantic because the German fleet are felt weaker than the Japanese fleet. Color me shocked and surprised. I know there are going to be so many movie makers who are horrified at this idea, but yes. And just wait if she'd ended up in the Mediterranean versus the Italian fleet, and when they'd actually been fighting. It's always nice to try and launch something small. She's 14,576 tons in standard. She's 730 feet long in terms of her waterline, 769 feet overall. She has 53,500 shaft horsepower, but she's again twin-shafted, and there is a lovely picture of her in 1936 off Honolulu with Lexington and Saratoga. And while she could normally carry 76 aircraft and maximum 86, thanks to 3 elevators, 3 catapults, and a rather large accelerators of this term, and a rather large hangar setup. She was again not as warmly received as you would think she would have been, considering she's the first purpose-built aircraft carrier. I would argue that's probably down to the funnel arrangement. Oh, happy days. She was initially designed and commissioned without actually a torpedo stowage or the torpedo bomber squadron. And thankfully, they managed to decide to refit her in 1941. Ay, caramba. She works hard, though. Soryu is different. Her and sister Hiryu were built so differently they're often considered separate classes, but they are interesting ships. Soryu is a sort of blue or green dragon. She displaces 16,200 tons in stand. Now, if you read the Institution of Naval Architects 1934 book, again, always worthwhile looking because it has things that are officialdom in there. And the officialdom was expecting the new carriers of the Japanese, because of treaty limits, of course, don't you know, to both displace roughly 10,000 tons. So a little bit more than Ryuju, but not that massive because, well, the thing was, Hosha and Ryuju come to 14,500 tons between them. Akagi and Kaga come to near as enough as makes no difference 54,000 tons. No. Yeah, 54,000 tons. Add that together. Technically, you have 70,000 tons. And the limit on carrier construction is supposedly 81,000 tons for Japan. That would mean Husha would have to go, for starters. But theoretically, she was supposed to be 10,000 tons. Now, the thing is, you can fit a lot in an extra 60% of hull. 746 feet overall, beam 69 feet. They do like that one. 152,000 shaft horsepower, 63 aircraft plus 9 reserve aircraft. 6 twin 5-inch guns, 14 twin 25mm guns, top speed of 34 knots, a range of 7,750 nautical miles at 18 knots. She's a fast ship, she's a hard ship, she's sunk at midway. Well, scuttled during midway. And she is commissioned in 1937. Hence she's on trials in 1938. Yorktown and Enterprise. This is where America gets away with it, because, of course, these were supposed to be 20,000 tons each. That was what they were projected to be. Which, again, 135,000 tons is my limit, apparently. So I have two 33,000-ton ships for 66,000 tons, 11,500 and 13,800 tons, which by my count comes to 25,300 tons onto 66,000 tons. Well, you add the two together, you're talking 91,300 tons, which gives you 44,000 tons roughly left over. And their plan is two 20,000-ton cruise ships and a 15,000-ton one, probably to replace Langley. Not bad numbers. Not bad numbers. Americans are roughly keeping it in because they can. But do they keep it in? Let's see. The Yorktown class displace 20,100 tons in standard, roughly. And they are gorgeous ships again with the US Navy building. But, and I say this from a loving place, Yorktown, commissioned 1937, is sunk during Midway. Enterprise, well, she is commissioned in 1938, and she survives. Weighs the same. Both have a speed of 32.5 knots, a range of 12,500 nautical miles. Both are 770 feet long at the waterline, 809 feet overall, so just a bit longer. No, 824 feet, just a bit overall. So just a bit shorter than the Lexington and Saratoga at their 888 feet. Bit wider, 109 feet at the flight deck, so just a tad wider than them. And she's got 8 5-inch guns. Enterprise would get 40 millimeters during World War II, but Yorktown didn't. And you can see again their design. You can see their shaping. You can see where everything is on these hulls, and that's one of the cool things about them. They have these free lifts, and it just makes all the organization make sense. It makes their workings make sense. The way they are laid out, you can tell where the Americans are coming from when they are designing these ships. And it's 90 aircraft carried because, again, they're going for the big flight. And they are designed to rein those aircraft up to launch that big strike. That's the point. You either have to design your carrier around the idea of continuous air operations or big strike. You cannot really do both. You can, but you need a very large carrier to do it. And probably a second hangar to stow the stuff you need to maintain. So the French were onto that one with the Joffre and the burn. Just the way they got round it was just off. Hiryu and Ark Royal. Special ships. Hiryu would also be lost at Midway. Ark Royal will be lost to a submarine's torpedo and bad battle management. It happens, but it shouldn't. Ark Royal displaced 22,000 tons in standard. She was 800 feet overall in length, 94 feet wide, and had 102,000 shaft horsepower. But she did have 3 shafts, which the Admiralty had nard over because they were very much wedded to the quadruple shaft arrangement for getting high speed from a large vessel. But they go with the treble shaft because it saves weight to have only 3 sets of propulsion machinery. A lot of weight, a lot of displacement gets saved. And this is one of the reasons why she can afford to have some armor. She has 3.5 inch of deck armor over the boiler rooms and magazines. Not quite the same as the illustrious class, which would come afterwards, but fairly decent. And she has a 4.5 inch belt. She has 8 twin 4.5 inch guns, 4 quadruple 40mm guns, that's pom-pom 2-pounder ones, and 8 quadruple 50-inch 0.5 inch AA machine guns. She is a massively high ship. She is really, really high. She would tower over many vessels even to this day. In fact, I think I've read that she would tower over a modern supercarrier because she's that high out the water. She is designed for 72 aircraft, usually carried roughly 50 to 60 due to various issues in terms of aircraft supply. But she was a good ship. And she had 3 lifts, again arranged so that you could. It's quite interesting because there was one actually positioned directly behind, directly sort of positioned for the barrier. So you have 2 positioned forward like this, and they would be in front of not only. Sometimes you could have a second barrier range that would have were positioned so basically you could be loading up aircraft and they could be taken straight to the accelerators to speed up launch for getting a strike off or getting fighters airborne. Or you could have sort of use those 2 lifts to lift up aircraft and then position them on the flight deck to build up your strike group. But they had another lift slightly further back. It could, if you were launching a major strike, be used to help add the speed of upload, or it can be used to carry on landing operations of other aircraft which are coming in. You can be landing aircraft whilst you're arranging your strike. This is the important thing, because the arrestor wires and everything are aft. The same on the Hiryu, which is similar to her sister but slightly different in that she is 17,600 tons in standard. She is 746 feet overall. She has 153,000 shaft horsepower again. Similar guns and 64 aircraft carried plus 9 spares. So that's an single extra aircraft, which isn't bad. It's always nice to have an extra aircraft. Honestly, we'd all like an extra aircraft sometimes. Now, why are more aircraft carriers produced in the 1920s than the 1930s? Well, there's the treaties. And also there's the fact there's the experimental phase, where they're surging carriers out. And I would argue that the 1930s are the phase where they start to solidify ideas. For Britain, it's the idea of the strength deck as your flight deck. Ark Royal. If you don't have that design, you can't make any of the armored hangar carriers, any of the things that the British do with its their carrier aviation actually come viable none of them work without that step, where they codify all the knowledge that's been built up in converting furious, converting courageous, glorious, building Hermes, converting Eagle, even converting Argus. All that knowledge comes together to produce this, the Royal Navy strike carrier. Firepower personified. And that's what they needed. With the Japanese Navy, Soryu and Hiryu, well, that's them completely breaking away from the treaties openly, pretty much. Everyone can work, everyone has naval constructors, all of them can start doing sums and start working out. These things don't add up. Ranger is the US Navy going, we're trying, and then going, it ain't gonna work. So then they build a Yorktown Enterprise. Oh, gorgeous ships. But you forget what a backbone these ships are, along with Lexington and Saratoga, to the US carrier fleet at the beginning of World War II, and you forget the fact they lose them. And then they're struggling to replace them. And that's one of the interesting stories of 1942. 1943 is the US reaction to, first, its dependence upon its carrier arm, despite it in many ways emphasizing their strike capability far more than the British, who were looking at their spotting, reconnaissance, global or continuous operational capability, and then their reaction to losing that capability. It's an interesting psychological profile, really. But very interesting ships. And I hope you've enjoyed, and I hope you will enjoy joining me for part 7. Thank you. That should be out in a bit. Take care. Thank you to everyone who's watched, and thank you again to those who very kindly helped me get all the research together for part 5. Thank you.